The party was at its peak when I took the microphone and asked for silence. All eyes turned to me, some already curious, others strangely worried. I took a deep breath, as if I needed courage to get through what was to come. There she was, on the other side of the hall, with that smile that had fooled me so many times. And there, standing next to her, looking lost and trying to disguise his nervousness, was him, the company manager, her lover, someone I had known for years and had always considered a friend. "I want to announce something important," my voice sounded firmer than I expected. The silence was so thick you could almost hear it. I could feel every look, every face waiting anxiously for some festive revelation, perhaps a promotion or good news for the company. But at that moment, there was nothing to celebrate, except my own liberation. "I'm divorcing my wife," I said, my voice echoing around the room. I saw her face freeze, the expression of someone caught in the act, and the panic in both our eyes. A few people around started to murmur, but I didn't lose focus. I continued, "And by chance, the man next to her, yes, our manager, is her lover." The impact was immediate. The buzz spread, with eyes crossing, trying to assimilate what they had just heard. I felt a pang of relief and, at the same time, pain as I saw the faces of surprise, indignation and even pity around me. But at that moment, I wasn't there to seek anyone's understanding, much less to forgive. She tried to get closer, her hands shaking, her eyes glistening with tears that were perhaps genuine or just a reflection of the fear of losing everything. "Please, let's talk in private." "It didn't have to be like this," she whispered, her voice trembling, trying to contain the situation. I interrupted her. "We had time to talk, but that was before I found out what was going on." She recoiled, seeming to cringe at the words that seemed as heavy as sharp blades. And he, the one I once called friend, just bowed his head, unable to look me in the eye. The reaction of my colleagues was a mixture of shock and embarrassment, some whispering, others trying to get away from the epicenter of the scandal. The party atmosphere completely broke up and silence reigned. The revelation had turned what was supposed to be an evening of socializing into a field of emotional ruins, where every word seemed like an irrevocable sentence. Those next few moments were like a trance, with my mind wandering between memories of everything we had built together, the promises exchanged, the plans made. But there, in the face of blatant betrayal, there was no room for nostalgia or regret. Only the certainty that everything had ended in a cruel and ironic way. The manager, the one who was supposed to ensure order and trust within the company, was now the exact representation of the deepest betrayal. As I turned to leave, I felt her gaze burning into my back, silently begging for a chance to explain, an apology, or even a discussion. But she knew that any words now would be empty. And I knew that any explanation would only prolong the pain. In the days that followed, something in me awoke. The public humiliation was just the beginning, and as I reflected on every detail, I decided that true justice had not yet been served. The morning after the party, I received an unexpected phone call from the company's management. They had heard the rumors and wanted to know what exactly had happened, as the situation involved the manager of one of the most important sectors. The opportunity unfolding in front of me was too tempting to ignore. A plan began to take shape in my mind, something that would put both of them, her and him, exactly where they deserved to be. In the game of power and betrayal, I would become the agent of retribution. Welcome to our channel. Here, we do not and will never support any kind of betrayal. The stories you will hear are fictional, created to show how betrayal can devastate lives, destroy trust and leave deep scars. Get ready for an intense and revealing story that will grip you from start to finish. Enjoy, and hold your breath, because this story promises to be shocking. In the stillness of any given morning, Ethan watched the city wake up through his office window. Life in Boston had always seemed to him to be a perfect blend of relentless movement and the quiet serenity of moments like this. The city was his refuge and his scene of achievement. Working for more than 15 years in the same company, Ethan had risen through the ranks to earn the respect of his colleagues and, finally, his superiors. He was a methodical man, always dedicated, with a sense of ethics and duty that earned him admiration. But despite his stability and professional merits, his real satisfaction was his family, especially his relationship with Olivia, his wife. Olivia was a charming woman, known for her charismatic manner and natural ability to make friends. The owner of an expressive artistic talent, she worked in an art gallery, an environment that reflected her colorful and often impulsive personality. She and Ethan formed a seemingly perfect couple, a balance between reason and passion, between the meticulous and the spontaneous. When they first met, they were immediately attracted to the differences between them and, over the years, they had learned to live with these particularities, building a harmonious life together. However, as with any long-term relationship, their marriage was not without its challenges. Olivia had an intensity that sometimes surprised Ethan. She was driven by passion and, in her constant search for novelty, easily got bored with routines. Ethan, on the other hand, found comfort in predictability and security. This difference, which had once been attractive, was beginning to create tensions. Ethan knew that his dedication to work often took him away from his family and that Olivia felt neglected. They had talked about it several times, and he had promised to make more of an effort to be there. In response, she seemed to be trying to understand his side, striving to maintain her patience and commitment to the marriage. Still, Olivia seemed restless. Over the last few months, Ethan had noticed a different gleam in her eye, something he wasn't sure how to interpret. She was happier, lighter and, at the same time, reserved. When he asked, she simply replied with a smile, saying that she was enjoying the moment. Ethan tried to believe that it was a sign that the hard times were behind them and that they had finally found stability again. Meanwhile, at the company, Ethan was working alongside a younger but ambitious colleague called Marcus. Marcus had been promoted to finance manager just over a year ago and was becoming an increasingly present figure in Ethan's professional life. With an undeniable charisma and a subtle ability to manipulate conversations, Marcus quickly integrated himself into the company's social circles, earning both the respect and friendship of many. He knew how to captivate people, and Ethan, although he recognized Marcus' talent, was wary of his behavior, which sometimes seemed a little calculating. Over time, Olivia and Marcus got to know each other at a company get-together, where Ethan proudly introduced his wife to his colleague. The two apparently shared a few laughs and chatted about trivial topics. But for Ethan, there was no reason to be suspicious. In fact, he was happy to see that Olivia was integrating well into his professional environment. From that meeting onwards, Marcus would occasionally ask about her in casual conversation, mentioning the conversation they'd had and praising her intelligence and charm. Ethan took these comments in stride, proud of his wife. Olivia, on the other hand, seemed increasingly immersed in her activities, looking for new forms of artistic expression and putting in extra hours at the gallery. She said she was engaged in a project that required her full attention, and Ethan, who knew his wife's passionate nature, supported her, encouraging her talent. However, although his confidence in her was unshakable, a discreet nagging was beginning to form in his subconscious. He noticed subtle changes in their dynamic. Olivia was more reserved, sometimes distracted, and he felt that the distance between the two of them was growing. But, without concrete reasons, he preferred to believe that these were common phases in any marriage, a natural wear and tear that, with dialogue and patience, could be overcome. Ethan devoted himself intensely to his work and, on the most exhausting days, he used to remind himself of the promises he had made to Olivia, to be more present, more attentive. With this in mind, he would plan a few simple surprises, such as dinners in restaurants she loved, small gifts that symbolized the years of their relationship, and even a short trip for the two of them to rest and reconnect. Olivia, for her part, always reacted enthusiastically, but there was something restrained in her responses, as if she was trying hard to reciprocate his affection, but without the intensity of before. As the end of the year approached, the company started planning a big party, a tradition that everyone looked forward to. Ethan saw the party as an ideal opportunity to get closer to Olivia and show her how much she meant to him. He had planned every detail carefully, from the clothes he would wear to the moment he intended to discreetly give her a special gift. However, he noticed that Olivia seemed strangely anxious about the event. She repeatedly asked questions about who would be there, the times and even the theme of the party, something that, for Ethan, was curious to say the least, considering that she had never shown such interest in these details before. Meanwhile, Marcus, the manager, began to show himself to be even more present behind the scenes, taking on extra tasks and, in a way, trying to impress the board with his willingness. He seemed to be in pursuit of something greater, a goal that was still unclear, but which made him act with unusual intensity. Ethan watched these moves with a mixture of interest and suspicion, because he knew that Marcus was ambitious and possibly looking for a quick rise. Still, as an experienced professional, Ethan maintained a neutral stance, aware that power shifts were a natural part of the corporate environment. As the event approached, everyone's emotions seemed to run high. Ethan, without realizing it, had been hoping that the party would be a milestone moment when he and Olivia could reconnect. He spent the days leading up to the event devoting himself to every detail, choosing the ideal gift and revisiting memories that he believed would still be able to rekindle the love between them. However, something inside him made him wonder if he was ignoring obvious signs, an intuition drowned out by his own hope that everything would go back to the way it was. On the day of the party, Olivia dressed up with special care. Her smile seemed more intense, her eyes shone with a light that Ethan hadn't seen for a long time. He watched her in silence as she got ready, not sure what it meant, but admiring her with the same reverence he had felt the first time he saw her. That was the kind of look that, for Ethan, was worth every sacrifice, every moment of effort. He believed that the sparkle in her eyes was a good omen, an indication that they were ready to start again. As they walked to the party together, Ethan couldn't help but feel a sense of anxiety, a feeling that something was about to change forever. He wasn't sure what it was, but he preferred to push the negative thoughts away, focusing only on the idea that this was going to be a special night. When they arrived at the venue, they were greeted enthusiastically by their colleagues, and soon they were mingling with the group, saying hello and exchanging laughs with friends and acquaintances. Ethan felt confident, certain that he had made the right decision in insisting on Olivia being with him that night. However, throughout the party, he noticed that something in the atmosphere seemed slightly out of place. Between the conversations and laughter, an almost imperceptible silence hung in the air, as if there was something unsaid, something that only he seemed to sense. Olivia was by his side, but there was an emotional distance between them that seemed insurmountable. He tried to concentrate on the conversations and his surroundings, but he couldn't help noticing the discreet glances she cast around, as if she was waiting for something or someone. As the hours passed, Ethan felt increasingly restless, but he didn't say anything. Instead, he observed the details, trying to make sense of his growing discomfort. Something about that night was unsettling him deeply, but he preferred to believe that it was just the weight of the last few months, a feeling that might be passing. And, as the clock ticked down, he found himself at an emotional crossroads, between the need to confront that uncomfortable feeling and the desire to preserve the peace he had sought so hard. The introduction was over, but a part of him knew that this was only the beginning of a series of discoveries that would forever change the life he and Olivia had built together. That night at the party, Ethan still felt strange, with the intuition that something was out of place. He tried to focus on the conversations, the familiar faces and the laughter around him, but there was a restlessness that seemed to surface more and more inside him. Between glasses of wine, he found himself observing Olivia, who looked enchantingly beautiful. She chatted animatedly with people, smiling in a way he hadn't seen for some time, but to Ethan, her enthusiasm seemed slightly exaggerated, as if she were more involved in something other than the party. Deep down, Ethan still hoped that the evening would bring them back together. Determined to go one step further, he approached Olivia, suggesting that they go to a quieter corner to talk and enjoy a moment alone. But she looked at him with a hesitant smile and said she'd be right back. He nodded, disguising his disappointment. Minutes passed and she didn't come back. Ethan began to worry, wondering if something had happened. After a few minutes of waiting, he decided to look for her. He looked around the hall, trying to spot her among the groups of people, but Olivia wasn't there. As he headed down the corridor to the toilets, he heard a familiar laugh at the end of the corridor. His intuition kicked in and he followed the sound, his heart beating faster with every step. There, hidden in a darker corner, he saw Olivia in animated conversation with Marcus, the manager. They were both laughing as if they shared a secret. When they realized Ethan's presence, they both fell silent abruptly, and Olivia took a step back, as if caught off guard. "Everything okay here?" asked Ethan, trying to disguise the tension in his voice. Olivia exchanged a quick glance with Marcus before answering, "Oh, of course. We were just talking about art and the gallery events." Ethan smiled, but something inside him screamed that this scene wasn't as innocent as she wanted to make it seem. He watched Marcus, who seemed to maintain an air of indifference, but avoided direct eye contact with him. Although he still wanted to believe Olivia's version, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that there was something deeper going on between the two of them. Over the next few days, the distance between him and Olivia seemed to grow, even without any open discussion. Her excuses for working late became more frequent, and he began to notice that her cell phone was always turned down or on silent mode. At night, although they still shared the same bed, there was a gulf between them. Ethan began to wonder if this was just a figment of his imagination or if there was something concrete to his suspicions. One afternoon, while Ethan was still in the office, he received an anonymous message on his personal email. It was short and to the point, with a single sentence: "Be careful who you trust." The message gave him a chill, as if it were the harbinger of something dark. He reread the sentence several times, trying to decipher whether it was a bad joke or a serious warning. Unsure of how to react, he put the message away in a hidden folder, but the words kept echoing in his mind. Olivia's behavior, on the other hand, was becoming more evasive. She was always busy, leaving the house before dawn for gallery projects and returning late, exhausted and apparently irritated. When Ethan tried to strike up a conversation, she became impatient, saying that she needed space and was overloaded. He tried to respect her wishes, but he felt more and more distant from her, as if she were just an invisible presence in his life. One evening, he decided to invite her out for dinner, trying to regain the closeness he valued so much. Olivia accepted, albeit reluctantly. Throughout the dinner, he tried to bring up light topics and memories of the first years of their marriage, but Olivia seemed oblivious, responding only with monosyllables, as if she were trapped in another world. At one point, her phone vibrated, and she quickly picked it up, looking at the message with an expression that didn't go unnoticed by Ethan. "Is it from work?" he asked, trying to keep his tone casual. Olivia hesitated for a second before replying, "Yes, just something from the gallery. Nothing important." She put the phone back on the table, but he noticed that the sparkle in her eyes had disappeared. Something about the way she acted made him increasingly confused and suspicious. A few days later, during working hours, Ethan saw Marcus in the company cafeteria. As he approached him to say hello, he noticed a subtle change in his colleague's behavior, who looked away and quickly ended the conversation. Ethan wasn't sure what to expect, but this behavior increased his doubts. He began to pay attention to Marcus' interactions, looking for any sign that might confirm or dispel his suspicions. Not knowing where to turn, he decided to confide his concerns in an old friend from the company, someone he trusted completely. During a casual conversation, Ethan expressed his doubts and insecurities about Olivia's behavior. The friend listened attentively and, although he was cautious in his advice, suggested that he not ignore his intuitions. The recommendation resonated deeply with Ethan, who began to observe every detail even more closely, as if trying to piece together an invisible puzzle. One Saturday, while Olivia was working on yet another of her projects, Ethan decided it was time to look for answers. He got in his car and drove to the gallery where she claimed to be. When he arrived, he parked discreetly and waited for a few minutes, until he realized that the lights were off and the door was locked. That realization was a painful blow. If she wasn't in the gallery, where would she be? He felt a growing emptiness in his chest, a sense of betrayal that was beginning to suffocate him. Determined to understand the truth, Ethan began to search for more clues. One afternoon, he had the opportunity to check Olivia's cell phone while she was in the shower. He felt like he was invading her privacy, but doubt and discomfort were eating away at him. With his heart racing, he searched through the messages, but found nothing explicit. It was as if she had taken extreme care to erase any trace of their communications. The only thing that caught his eye was a contact number with no name, only identified as a telephone number. He memorized the sequence, intending to investigate further. A few days later, while trying to distract himself in his office, he received a call from an unknown number. He answered hesitantly, and the voice on the other end of the line made his heart race. It was a woman, who sounded cautious, almost nervous, asking if he knew where his wife was. The call was brief, but it was clear that there was something more at stake, something beyond his control. He hung up, feeling trapped in a mystery that seemed to grow with every new detail. Those suspicions and isolated incidents formed a complex web of mistrust that Ethan could barely process. He no longer knew what to expect when he returned home, where the silence between him and Olivia became more oppressive. Finally, he decided it was time to face the situation head-on. During a tense evening, he asked Olivia directly about her behavior, about the nights out, the appointments at the gallery. But instead of an answer, he received cold, evasive looks. She argued that he was being paranoid and controlling and, with a wounded tone of voice, said that perhaps he didn't understand the pressure she was under at work. Despite her explanations, Ethan felt that this was not the whole truth. The pieces of the puzzle were still scattered, but he was more determined than ever to find the answers he was looking for. One sleepless night, he began to put together a plan, something that would allow him to gather the evidence he needed to finally face reality. He needed to know if his fears were unfounded or if, in fact, everything he had built with Olivia was about to come crashing down. A few days later, a coincidence brought the confirmation he had been dreading. He was leaving the company when he saw Marcus, the manager, standing next to Olivia, both of them talking intimately, with a closeness that seemed to transcend the professional environment. The sight shook him and, with his heart in pieces, he finally realized that his suspicions had been correct. There, before his eyes, the truth was revealed like a sharp blade. The pain of betrayal consumed him, but Ethan knew at that moment that revenge was an inevitable course of action. The morning after the party, Ethan woke up with a heavy mind and a quiet determination growing inside him. The confirmation that Olivia was involved with Marcus had crossed the last line of trust he had. There was no more room for doubt. He needed to face reality firmly and, above all, confront them directly. Determined, Ethan arranged a meeting with the company's board of directors. The scandal that might arise was not his main concern, he wanted justice. As he entered the meeting room, he realized that Marcus was already there, oblivious to the maelstrom Ethan was preparing. Olivia had also been called in, but was visibly uncomfortable when she realized Ethan's presence, sitting in one of the chairs in front of the long glass table. With everyone in their places, Ethan remained silent, observing the tense faces around him. After a few seconds that seemed like an eternity, he finally began to speak. "You must be wondering why I asked for this meeting so suddenly," he began, keeping his tone firm. "There's something important that everyone here needs to know." Marcus exchanged a quick glance with Olivia, who kept her gaze fixed on her hands, avoiding facing Ethan directly. The board, meanwhile, looked on curiously, awaiting the revelation. Ethan continued, with a look that mixed pain and determination. "There's something I've been enduring for the last few months. Something that, I confess, has taken me a long time to see clearly." He took a deep breath, the words weighing as if they carried years of resentment. "I found out that my wife, Olivia, is having an affair with Marcus, our manager." The room seemed to freeze for a moment. Marcus tried to keep his composure, but his face paled. Olivia, on the other hand, took a deep breath, as if prepared for a defense. The embarrassment in the air was almost palpable, and the directors murmured, shocked by the information. Marcus, trying to regain control of the situation, raised his hands in a conciliatory gesture. "Ethan, I understand that you're upset. Can we talk in private? There's no need to involve everyone in this personal matter." "Personal matter?" Ethan laughed, a bitter laugh that echoed around the room. "When you brought my wife into this kind of situation, it stopped being personal. You knew exactly what you were doing." He turned to Olivia, his gaze full of hurt and disappointment. "I just want to know one thing, Olivia." "Why?" She hesitated, struggling to find the words. "Ethan. I don't know what to say. I'm sorry." "Sorry?" Ethan's voice was full of disbelief and anger. "You're sorry now that you've been caught, aren't you?" He looked directly at Marcus. "What about you, Marcus? Was that the kind of relationship you wanted to build in the company?" Marcus swallowed dryly, clearly lost between his image of professionalism and the chaos that was ensuing. "Ethan, it wasn't something we planned. It just happened. I'm sorry too." Ethan's reaction was immediate, a slap in the face that left Marcus paralyzed for a second. The room fell completely silent as everyone watched in amazement. But the real shock was yet to come. Before they could say anything, one of the directors, the oldest in the room and one of the company's founders, snorted, breaking the silence. He stared at Olivia and then at Ethan, with a serious look on his face. "Ethan," he said quietly, "maybe this is the time for you to know something we've been keeping secret, something that perhaps goes beyond what you expect." He exchanged glances with the other directors, who agreed in silence. "Olivia was hired here a few years ago, right? But there's something else about her you need to know." Ethan, confused, frowned. "What do you mean? What else could I not know?" The director hesitated, as if he didn't want to go any further, but took a deep breath before continuing. "The truth is that Olivia, she already had a relationship with another member of the company before you knew. And that someone is Marcus. Your affair started much earlier than we thought, didn't it, Olivia?" Olivia closed her eyes, unable to deny it. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, it started years ago. Long before you found out." The confession sounded like a mortal blow to Ethan, who felt betrayed not just once, but several times. The meeting room was in an awkward silence as he absorbed every word with a mixture of pain and disbelief. And then the director made his final revelation. But this relationship had consequences that put the company in a vulnerable situation. Olivia, over the years, used company resources to hold these meetings with Marcus, and this was detected in a recent audit. The accusation stunned everyone in the room. Ethan looked at Olivia, who now seemed reduced to an embarrassed figure, clearly at a loss for words to justify her actions. Marcus, for his part, remained silent, as if he knew his career was about to crumble. Ethan, still in shock, could barely find the words to express the fury and disappointment he felt. "So all of this was just a game to you? Something that could be kept in the shadows while I was made a fool of?" Olivia, her eyes watering, finally raised her face to look at him. "Ethan. I don't know what to say. I let myself go. I made the wrong choices I deeply regret." Marcus, now in a last desperate effort, tried to defend himself. "Olivia and we had a connection, something you might never understand. But, Ethan, I never wanted things to come to this. I was caught up in it too." Ethan's gaze on him was icy. "No, Marcus. You chose this situation. You both made your choices, and now you'll have to bear the consequences." He turned to the directors, who still seemed to be processing the gravity of the situation. "I expect you to take the appropriate action. No company deserves to be the victim of such disloyalty." The older director nodded, already visibly determined. "Marcus, Olivia, you are both officially dismissed." And investigations will continue to assess the financial and ethical damage caused by your actions. Olivia, overcome with despair, tried to grab Ethan's arm as he left the room. Ethan, please. Let me explain. Let me at least try to make amends. He looked at her, with an expression that mixed hurt and resolution. There's nothing more to be said, Olivia. I've been loyal to you, I've given my all to this marriage, and you've trampled on our history. And with those words, he disentangled himself from her touch and left the room, without looking back. Ethan left the company with a mixture of relief and sadness. Everything he thought he knew had been shattered in a succession of betrayals and lies. And although he knew that the future would be difficult, he was certain that he would never again accept anything that put his dignity at risk. As Ethan left the company, he felt an avalanche of conflicting emotions. The revelation of the betrayal, the impact of the lies and, above all, the resentment of everything Olivia and Marcus stood for, consumed him. He walked through the streets trying to process what he had just experienced, while her image and the director's words about the embezzled funds still echoed in his mind. This wasn't just a question of love betrayal, but also a violation of basic principles of trust and loyalty. Every step he took seemed to take him further away from what he believed to be his own home. When he got home, the silence seemed even more oppressive. The living room, full of memories of their years of marriage, seemed a strange, uninhabited place. The picture frames, personal belongings, and even the details of the decoration he and Olivia had chosen together now seemed like mere symbols of a life that was gradually revealing itself to be based on illusions and lies. The pain of betrayal was intense, but there was something even more disturbing, the emptiness of realizing that, over the years, he had blinded himself to signs that now seemed blatant. He felt consumed by a mixture of anger and impotence, but also by the need to rebuild his life from that breaking point. Amidst the whirlwind of feelings, a part of Ethan began to question his own choices. He was someone who had always believed in the power of work, in the importance of dedication, and had sacrificed a lot for the sake of what he considered to be a secure future for both of them. But now he wondered if, somehow, his obsession with work and financial stability had driven Olivia away. This thought bothered him deeply. Not that it justified her choices, but it made him reflect on his own actions and how, somehow, the marriage had been lost somewhere along the way. Ethan spent the next few days immersed in silence, avoiding unnecessary interaction. At work, he was now constantly questioned about the situation with Marcus, who had left the company abruptly, and about the comments that had circulated after the revelation. His colleagues looked at him with curiosity and compassion, but he answered only the essentials, preferring to keep the situation private. At home, he dedicated himself to organizing the divorce papers, although the process was still extremely painful. Olivia, on the other hand, insistently tried to contact him, sending messages, leaving messages on his cell phone and even handwritten letters, in which she tried to explain herself, beg for a second chance and justify her mistakes. She tried to argue that the affair with Marcus was just a phase, a mistake, something she had lost control of. But to Ethan, every word she read sounded empty, like a desperate attempt to escape the consequences of her actions. Olivia's apologies didn't carry the weight needed to mitigate the pain caused, the damage had been too deep, as if he had been hit at the very core of who he was. On a particularly difficult evening, he finally decided to reply to one of Olivia's messages, arranging to meet at a neutral location. Ethan's aim was not to hear explanations, but to put an end to any illusion of reconciliation that she might have been harboring. He didn't want to prolong a suffering that, for him, was already over. He wanted to look into her eyes one last time and confirm that the marriage was indeed over. At the chosen restaurant, Olivia arrived first, visibly anxious, and tried to greet him with a touch on the arm, but Ethan pulled away, making it clear the limit he was imposing. The atmosphere between them was tense, and they both seemed to know that this conversation would be final. Olivia began to speak, in an emotional, almost tearful tone. "Ethan, please, just listen to me. I know I've made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but I love you. I never wanted any of it to end like this. Love. Ethan replied, the tone of his voice sharp and incredulous. You call that love, Olivia? Love that cheats, that lies, that embezzles money and hides secrets? Do you really think that's love? She lowered her gaze, looking ashamed, but continued. I know I made a mistake. I know I can't erase what I did. But I really didn't want it to end. I was confused, I felt alone. Ethan, I need you to understand, I just want a second chance. We can rebuild, I swear. Ethan looked at her with an expression of skepticism and exhaustion. Second chance. He shook his head. Olivia, you've had every possible chance and you've thrown it away. You made choices, conscious choices that are now taking their toll. You destroyed what we had and, frankly, I don't see any way back. Not after everything. Her frustration was evident, but Ethan wasn't moved. He saw that meeting as a last chance to close that chapter, to free himself from everything that bound him to a past corroded by falsehood. I'm not going to change my mind, Olivia, he said definitively. This marriage is over. And you're going to have to deal with it, just like me. Olivia, realizing the inevitability of the situation, let the tears fall freely. She hadn't expected things to turn out this way. In the back of her mind, she had always hoped that he would forgive her, that time would heal the wounds and that, somehow, they would get back to who they once were. But when she saw the firmness in Ethan's gaze, she realized that he was determined to move on, even if it meant cutting all the ties that bound them together. After that meeting, Ethan felt strangely relieved, as if a weight had finally been lifted from his back. From that moment on, he focused on reorganizing his life, now completely free of any expectation of reconciliation. Little by little, he rediscovered pleasure in activities he had abandoned, reconnected with old friends and tried to build a new routine that didn't include the fragments of his destroyed marriage. One afternoon, while reviewing documents for the divorce, he received an unexpected notification. It was an email from the company's legal team, informing him that the internal investigation into the embezzlement had been completed and that those responsible had been formally charged. The information brought him a sense of justice, as if some of the pain was finally being offset by the truth. Marcus and Olivia would face the consequences not only personally, but also professionally and legally. Reflecting on everything he had experienced, Ethan felt torn. There was a mixture of sadness and relief inside him, as if he finally understood that, however difficult it had been, he now had the opportunity to start again. The pain of the betrayal was still there, but it was like a wound that was slowly healing. And in the process, he realized how important it was to rediscover his own identity, away from the illusions and lies that had surrounded him for so long. Olivia, for her part, saw her life fall apart quickly and intensely. The gallery career she held so dear was jeopardized by accusations of misconduct, and her public image crumbled. Friends distanced themselves, and even family members, ashamed, remained silent. She spent her days looking for a way to mend what was left of her life, but each attempt seemed to result in more loneliness and regret. Deep down, she knew that the damage she had done was irreparable. For Ethan, the experience was a profound learning experience. He realized that, despite all the suffering, he was stronger and more aware of what really mattered. He felt grateful to finally be free of a life that somehow no longer belonged to him. And, as he looked to the future, he knew that every step from now on would be a conscious choice, based on principles he would never give up. So, while Olivia faced the consequences of her choices, Ethan walked towards a fresh start, determined not to let the past get him down and to build a life where his own integrity and well-being were absolute priorities. After months of confrontation, Ethan finally saw tranquility appearing on the horizon of his life. He had completed the divorce process, cutting the last ties that bound him to a past of lies. Inside, he felt a mixture of relief and residual sadness. The experience had transformed him, and he came out of it stronger and more determined, with the clarity of someone who has been through a storm and survived. Determined to rebuild his life on solid values, Ethan invested in new projects and sought to travel, reconnecting with his own essence and with friends who stood by his side. On one of these trips, he met people with stories of overcoming and courage, which inspired him to create a project aimed at helping others who, like him, had suffered from betrayals and deep disappointments. Ethan used his own experience to bring comfort and direction, transforming his pain into something that could positively impact other lives. This new purpose revitalized him, filling the void left by emotional scars. He no longer saw the betrayal as a burden, but as a lesson that had made him wiser and more resilient. On the other hand, Olivia was facing a path of increasing loneliness. The slip-up in the relationship and the consequences at work had not only brought her divorce, but also contempt from those close to her. Little by little, she found herself isolated, having to bear the brunt of her mistakes and impulsive choices. The art gallery, which had been her great passion, no longer brought her the same joy, and she was fired after the investigation revealed the use of resources for personal ends. Her world had fallen apart, and now Olivia lived in a constant struggle to start over in a place where she could leave the past behind. Emotional emptiness and disillusionment became part of her daily life. Olivia began attending support groups, seeking understanding and acceptance, but she knew that the journey of rebuilding would be a long one. Her life was now marked by regret and attempts to understand where she had lost herself along the way. Wrapped in reflection, she realized that the love Ethan had offered her had been real and deep, but that she, in her search for something she couldn't even define, had squandered that chance. Loneliness became her constant companion, a living reminder of everything she had lost. Meanwhile, Marcus, who had lost his job and his reputation, felt the impact of the consequences of his actions even more severely. Without the support of Olivia, who had distanced herself from him in the midst of his downfall, and without the respect of the colleagues who had once admired him, he had to deal with his own mistakes in isolation. Marcus was being investigated for embezzlement and his name was tarnished in the industry. He found it difficult to get new jobs, and his career seemed to be crumbling as quickly as his influence in the business world. Estranged from his family and without friends he could count on, Marcus found financial and professional ruin to be the bitter consequence of his arrogance and manipulation. He began to reflect on his life, on the unbridled desire for ascension and power that had led him to cross ethical boundaries and betray people who trusted him. In a belated effort, he tried to redeem himself, taking temporary jobs and struggling to reorganize his life. However, the weight of dishonor and the contempt of those around him followed him wherever he went. For Ethan, these events were just echoes of a chapter he was struggling to put behind him. On a quiet evening, he reflected on everything he had been through and realized that, despite the pain, he had gained something precious, the freedom to be who he really was, without being bound by expectations or false promises. His new life project was thriving and he felt renewed, able to see people and the world more clearly. Over time, Ethan found a new passion. Although the process of opening up to love again was gradual and careful, he finally allowed himself to trust and believe that he could build a healthy and true relationship. He learned to value sincerity and mutual respect as non-negotiable foundations for any relationship. On his new journey, Ethan let go of bitterness and embraced hope, aware that he had overcome one of the most challenging experiences of his life. And that was today's story. Comment below on what you thought of Ethan's journey and what you learned from it. If you liked it, subscribe to the channel for more impactful stories. And remember, under no circumstances does our channel support any kind of betrayal.